Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's going to be going over the 5 things that I like and the 5 things that I don't exactly like about the all-new Volvo C40. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time purchase car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. The first thing that I like is the overall design. So I think that Volvo's done a pretty good job with designing their modern vehicles and their modern electric vehicles like this C40. I think it has this cool, sleek, modern design. The side view is kind of interesting because it's such like a small stubby car and you've got like these huge wheels. This almost looks like a concept car, but this is actually something you can buy, which I think is kind of appealing. But yeah, I think they did a good job. And like those two little things there at the top of the roof, those are pretty cool. Now the first thing that I don't like is the key fob. So here's a key fob, and it actually reminds me of Mazda's key fob quite a bit. You got the Volvo logo there on the front, and then you guys can see you've got little like alarm button there, and then you've got nice grooves here for the buttons itself. But I just wish the buttons were on the side. I wish they were on the front like most key fobs, so they were bigger and more out there. I don't get this style of key fob. Now the second thing that I like is the interior. So with the new C40, they actually have this like really funky interior where you've got like the blue accenting. It is a vegan interior, which, you know, obviously people like that from an ethical standpoint. I just like vegan interiors because like the material use actually feels really good. Surprisingly, like not having real leather, I think I'm fine with it. Like I like how like soft this feels, if that makes sense. And so I think they've done a good job when it comes to material use, kind of going after what they want to go after from a market perspective. And I mean, it's an electric car that has a cool looking interior. Who would have thought? Now the second thing that I don't like is the range. So this has like 226 miles of EPA stated range, which is okay. That's competitive with a lot of electric cars in today's world, but guess what, electric cars, that's just not enough. I think for an electric car to actually be reasonable from a range perspective, it has to have at least 400 plus miles of range. So just being competitive isn't enough in my opinion. And so yeah, the range, again, it's right where the other, you know, luxury automakers are with these EVs, but they need to really bump things up at least 300 miles, if not 400 miles, if they really want to differentiate themselves. Now, the third thing that I like is actually the UI. So we get to pop in yet again, and it's pretty easy to start this thing up. Just put on the brake, and then I can just put it into drive, and then everything starts up, which is kind of convenient. But I like the gauge cluster, and you can like pop on a map if you want, and then the infotainment system's easy to use, and you guys can see here with like the camera, and if I want to like change viewpoints here with the camera, really like everything's easy to use. And this has Google integration, which I'm usually not fond of most like systems that are integrated with cars, but the Google integration with this works amazingly well with the navigation and everything. And so I'm actually a big fan of what Volvo's done with their, you know, overall UI here with the car. Now, the third thing that I don't like is the cold weather performance. So like most electric cars, when the weather starts to get wintry, you lose quite a bit of range. Now, there are some fixes where you can have like a battery heater, and some electric cars have that. I don't think this has that. Correct me in the comment section down below if I'm wrong, but I'm getting significantly less range than what is stated, you know, the 226. And on top of that, it gives me a warning saying that I'm not going to get as much range because of the cold, and I'm also not going to get all of the acceleration because of the cold. Volvo is a Swedish company. Sweden is in an area where it is cold for a large majority of the year, right? It's pretty far north. And so I don't understand why a Swedish company would build an electric car that sucks when it comes to driving in the cold. Like, just explain that to me. I don't get it. They need to at least throw a battery heater at this thing, or, you know, think up some cool creative technology, because Swedish people are really smart and they think up some pretty cool technological things. And so I'm sure they could figure out something to make their electric cars perform better in the cold when it comes to range and acceleration. Now, the fourth thing that I like is how this drives. So obviously, if you haven't seen my review on the main channel, then I'd recommend going and watching that so you can see the driving and everything. But I mean, being an electric car, really quick with the acceleration, and this isn't massive when it comes to the size. And so it actually is pretty fun and sporty to drive overall. Handling's great. Like it's actually just a blast to drive. And so I think that Volvo's done a great job with the driving dynamics, and their one pedal drive is so aggressive that when you like do fun sporty driving, you pretty much don't have to press the brake at all. You can just rely on the one pedal drive, which is kind of weird, but once you get used to it, it's pretty cool. And then the number 4 thing that I don't like is the size. So I think that you would probably consider this like a compact crossover with how small it is. I mean, you guys can see like the Tacoma next to it. The Tacoma's not a big truck, and this thing is tiny next to it, which is fine for like your front passengers, right? You can see decent amount of room there. And then the back passengers, they actually have, again, a decent amount of room. And then if we pop the hatch, we've got an okay amount of storage space, but I feel like a lot of the vehicles that are in this price range that are fully electric are just bigger than the C40. And so I think that either they should have made it slightly less expensive or slightly bigger for the price segment that it's in. And then the number 5 thing that I like is actually the price. So the Volvo C40 is roughly around $60,000. It depends on what package you get, options, all that kind of stuff. But it's about a $60,000 EV, which is not cheap by any means, but that's also a lot less expensive than a lot of the other EVs we're seeing in the market, which are like all over 6 figures, it seems. And yes, there are other affordable options like the Kia EV6, like the Ford Mustang Mach-e, but Volvo has amazing build quality. They are a luxury manufacturer, and so getting Volvo build quality and all of that with a car that is in a similar price bracket to non-luxury cars, I think that's pretty cool. And then the 5th and final thing is, well, charging network. Now this point obviously applies to every single EV that is not a Tesla, but it still needs to be talked about because every single EV that's coming out that's not a Tesla is coming out with a charging network that is absolutely atrocious. I've used the charging network here in Utah and it sucks. Half the time the chargers don't work, and if they do work, they barely charge your car. Like I have a 110 outlet at my house because I haven't had time to upgrade mine to a 240 quite yet, and I seem to get better charging amounts out of my 110 than I do out of the outlet, or not the outlets, but rather the charging stations here in Utah. Like, and I know it's not just like a thing here in Utah, it's all over the country. And so until there's a better charging network for other cars outside of Tesla, it's hard to jump into EVs outside of Tesla. And I am not a Tesla fan. I actually like really do not like the cars because like you compare this thing to a Tesla, the build quality is so much nicer. Like look at this, we don't have crazy panel gaps. Like it is all lined up, right? And this is not even, this is a pre-production car. So again, not a Tesla fan, but I am a Tesla charging network fan. Now that's pretty much going to sum things up for the 5 things that I like and the 5 things that I don't exactly like with the new Volvo C40. And in terms of my overall thoughts, I think this is a really fun EV, and I think it's going to be great for people that live in like really tight packed areas like California, for example. But out here in Utah, where we have a lot of space between cities and there's a lot of like high speed interstate driving, I just don't think it's necessarily the best car. It's very comfortable, like it drives really well, but when you only have just over 200 miles of range and you don't get that much when it's cold outside, it doesn't make sense. If we had a better charging network, maybe it would work, but at the same time, I also don't want to sit and wait for, 30 to 40 minutes every, 200 miles or even less than that, again, because of the loss you get in the cold. And so, yeah, I think this is a really good, like, it's not Volvo's first attempt at an EV because you have the XC40, which is kind of like the C40, but it's not. But I am excited to see how Volvo, like, improves upon this and, releases more EVs with better range, better technology, all that. But I'll see ya.